morning and good afternoon. My name is Kanchi Batra. I give you all a very warm welcome on behalf of our publisher, Miss Linda Brady Hawk. In commemoration of the 45th anniversary of the 1976 student uprising, the Diplomatist is proud, with the undoubted support and guidance of the South African High Commission in New Delhi, India, to be hosting this webinar titled Remembering the Soweto Uprising, Youth in Advancing Development, powered by India-Africa Trade Council. The webinar theme is inspired by the transformatory role played by the class of 1976 in the history and politics of South Africa. June 16 is seen as one of the country's most significant political moments, a day when Black students from all walks of life raised their voices and demanded to be heard. As we commemorate the 45th anniversary of the day when the young people of Soweto said enough, it is important for us as to remember that at the heart of it, there were principles of human dignity, common good, and solidarity. The student uprising marked a turning point in the country's history as students marched against the use of Afrikaans as the language of instruction and served as a spark that ignited the intensification of hostilities and ultimately led to the end of apartheid. We believe that Africa is not rightly represented. We at the Diplomatist highlight people who make a difference, leaders turning the tide, and youth driving change. This is what we believe will change the continent, and this is what we report on. Today's discussion is dedicated to the education and energy of youth. Today we are hosting an invited audience and a panel of distinguished speakers, including the High Commissioner of South Africa to India. We have also two young scholars who are studying Africa closely. Today we will discuss the legacy of Soweto. The deliberations will revolve around the challenges confronting young people as well as what should be done to address them. Our intention is to make links between history and the present day. Now I take the opportunity to introduce the chair for this discussion, Ambassador V.B. Soni, who's a seasoned diplomat with a distinguished career spanning 35 years, who has served in various capacities in Indian diplomatic missions in Moscow, Cairo, Kuala Lumpur, and London. He was Consul General of India in Sydney, Ambassador of India to Senegal, High Commissioner of India to Jamaica and Fiji, Ambassador of India to Ukraine. He has represented India and often headed official Indian delegation to many international conferences. In electronic and print media, he has frequent and popular invitee for his candid views on topics of international relations. Ambassador Soni, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us. Before you start the proceedings, I would like to inform all of you that Mr. Varun Jain, Chairman India-Africa Trade Council, will not be able to join us today, but he has sent his best wishes to all the concerned for a successful discussion. Thank you, and over to you, Ambassador Soni.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, everybody who are attending this important session. To me, it's a great initiative which has been taken to show our solidarity with Africa in general and South Africa in particular. So it's a pleasure to welcome you all at this landmark event that marks the 45th anniversary of that triggered change in the course of events that transformed the history of struggle against apartheid in South Africa. The June 16, 1976 uprising that began in Soweto and spread countrywide profoundly changed the socio-political landscape in South Africa. It can be traced back to the policies of the white racist government that introduced the Bantu Education Act in 1953. It sought compulsory enforcement of Afrikaans as the medium of instruction alongside English in schools for Black students. The rise of Black consciousness movement and other organizations raised the political consciousness, but others joined the wave of anti-apartheid movement within the student community. On that fateful day, thousands of students marched peacefully to demonstrate and protest against the government's directive. they were met by heavily armed police who fired tear gas and later live ammunition to demonstrating students, killing hundreds of them. This resulted in a widespread revolt that turned into an uprising against the government. While the movement began in Soweto, it spread across the country and carried on until the following year. The aftermath of the events had dire consequences for the practitioners of apartheid. Images of police firing on peacefully demonstrating students led to an international revulsion against the ruling regime in South Africa as its brutality was exposed. Meanwhile, the demoralized and exiled liberation movement leaders that had fled political persecution at home, but they got impetus and boost in the fight against the regime. On June 16 each year, South Africans commemorate it as Youth Day to pay tribute to them and acknowledge their role in the liberation of South Africa. With the first crucial battle having been won, it is time to reflect on how their contribution would continue to be critical in the future development of the country. In this, the experience, voice, and support of the Indian youth is bound to be of interest through their presence and articulation of views at this seminar. With this in view, the diplomatists, in association with South African High Commission in New Delhi and India-African Trade Council, has organized today's important interactive session. We're delighted that all of you have been able to join in today. I assure you that it's going to be a very interactive session. The people who are going to speak are supposed to be expert in their field. But most importantly, I have pleasure in welcoming the High Commissioner of South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Joel Sibusiso Ndile-Bele. He had a distinguished career in political and public life, having been on the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress since 1997. From 1994 to 2004, he was the MEC for Transport in the government of KwaZulu-Natal province. From 2004 to 2009, he was Premier of South African province of KwaZulu-Natal. From 2009 to 2012, he was a National Minister for Transport. He held the portfolio of Minister of Correctional Services from 2012 to 2014. With such distinguished credentials, we really look forward to listening to His Excellency, the High Commissioner of India. I personally have excellent personal rapport with the South African leadership. In 2012, I had the pleasure of leading a business delegation during the visit of the then President of India. It was a state visit of Mrs. Pratibha Patil. Leading the delegation, it gave me an opportunity to interact with people there. And since it was a business delegation, we had an excellent interaction and a lot of good things developed out of it. But without saying much, I would like to, first of all, welcome His Excellency and request him to please share your views and how do you feel the youth movement will continue to have important role to play in the march for development and further progress in your beautiful rainbow nation called South Africa. Over to you, His Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to commemorate this very important day. My fellow panelists, Dr. Hema Narang and Mr. Ralph Madlalate, let me first thank Ms. Kanchi Batra and a team at the Diplomatist for working with us to put together this commemorative event for our Youth Day celebration. Your continuous support is always appreciated. 45 years ago, on this day, if the question is asked, where were you? I was in prison. from the 4th of May of 1976, the apartheid security forces had put us on isolation, solitary confinement, where nobody knew where we were, just lost to the world until you are actually charged. Then at least you can get access to the lawyers. This year marks 45 years since the death-defying youth of South Africa stood up to the obnoxious apartheid regime, as that regime strove to tighten control over every facet of Black life in the land of their birth. The decision by the apartheid regime to impose Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in schools was yet another way in which the regime sought to advance and entrench the tyranny of apartheid. On June 16, 1976, students in Soweto organized what was supposed to be a peaceful march to protest the introduction of Afrikaans. Unfortunately, the peaceful protest of thousands of students was met by violence from the police and army. The response of the apartheid police and army was to open fire on students who, in their generality, were. This resulted in the deaths of nearly 200 students, and thousands more were injured. The uprising that began in Soweto spread across the country and carried on until the following year. The Soweto uprisings came at a time when South African apartheid regime was at its most vicious. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I quote, "Those who make peaceful resolution of conflict impossible make violent revolution inevitable." The uprising by the youth, not only in Soweto, but throughout the whole country, demonstrated that a just cause is capable of galvanizing society as a whole. Today, 16 June, is commemorated in South Africa as Youth Day to acknowledge this and celebrate the contribution of young people to fight against apartheid. We use this occasion to remember the youth of 1976 because they've left us a lesson that it is possible for young people to stand up and confront the challenges facing them. They left us a legacy of bravery and determination in the face of what appeared to be insurmountable difficulties. The legacy of 1976 uprising and the contribution of the young people for fighting against apartheid ably demonstrated that young people have a critical role to play in all our societies, developed and developing, and contribute to shaping of all our countries, not only as future leaders, but as leaders today already. Youth Day serves as a reminder that young people have a role to play in public life. The youth of today should be at the forefront of public discussion concerning the resolution of the many challenges that face our society. In post-apartheid South Africa, the youth have continued to contribute the shaping and development of our country. It was students who were at the forefront of calls for free higher education and the transformation of higher education in general. Over half the world's population is under 20, with 1.2 billion of these people falling between the ages of 15 and 24, with the majority of these people living in developing countries. The world is facing a myriad of challenges from armed conflict, terrorism, environmental degradation, and climate change, food, water, and energy insecurity, poverty, rising inequality, unemployment, crime, corruption, and now the global pandemic of COVID-19. Youth in and across all countries must play a role in the development and implementation of policies aimed at addressing these challenges. Young people must be afforded and take the space and opportunities to lead, not only in their immediate communities, which is often the first site of leadership for everyone, but in national and international affairs through the various avenues. The youth is essential to global economic growth, development, and stability, and now into the future. Young people's full and meaningful participation in developmental efforts can result in more sustainable and democratic societies that are equitable and peaceful, that meet the developmental needs of all people. Distinguished guests, in 2015, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved in 2030. These serve as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The SDGs are 17 integrated goals aimed at ending poverty, protecting the planet, and ensuring that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. They recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. A decade before the target date of the realization of the SDGs, COVID-19 swept through the world and threatened what progress had been made. This is in a context where progress on the SDGs was delayed. While the full toll of the pandemic is yet to be determined, some setbacks are apparent. These include huge reversal on goals on poverty. A frightening number of people have moved back into poverty. Gains that have been made on food security, gender equality, have been turned into its opposite, with women and girls being more affected, especially by lockdowns, which saw increased gender-based violence. COVID-19 also exacerbated inequalities across and within countries. These reversals call for a new commitment to youth engagement. Youth can truly be free if they become their own liberators. This is the singular lesson of 1976. With this recommitment, the SDG by 2030 is within reach. The contribution of young people on how we better work to confront these challenges need to be harnessed for the benefit of all our societies. The youth of 1976 in South Africa demonstrated the transformative effect that youth participation can have in confronting societal challenges. Program Director, Youth Month is dedicated to recognizing the role that young people played and continue to play in our society. It is the month to reflect and draw inspiration from experiences as we tackle the challenges confronting the youth today. I look forward to hear the views of my fellow panelists and the audience on the role that young people can play in addressing our common developmental challenges. Thank you once again for this opportunity to engage with all of you today. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you very much for your very, very illuminating words. I was particularly struck by your remark that we were on way to progress in your country and my country. But situation has gone beyond our control. We set SDG goals were attainable, sustainable at that particular time when they were drafted. But there has been setback in your country, perhaps, but more importantly in our country. The setback has been in terms of people, again, going back below poverty level. More importantly, there are challenges in the health field, which we all know. Unless and until we all get together, nothing can be done. But in this, the role of the youth is again very, very important. They have now to decide how they can come forward, because they are the youth. They are the hope for the country, and how they will carry on the message. The previous generation had their bit in your country, in my country, when they got independence. But it has to be carried on, the same message, the same dedication, and the same spirit of sacrifice has to be going on. Thank you, Your Excellency, for adding such a wonderful note for the beginning of this particular seminar, which promises to be very good. I have next a good friend of mine, personal friend, Mr. Asif Iqbal. Mr. Iqbal needs no introduction. He is an entrepreneur, and he is probably one of the most, I would say, dedicated person who wants to promote world trade, not just Indian trade. Of course, he's based in Bengaluru, so I don't get to see as much as I would have liked to. But his experience and is worldwide. It's not just pertaining to one region like Africa, or he is there everywhere. Africa, of course, is his one goal, but he goes to Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, wherever you know, he is there. His footprints are there. So, Mr. Asad Iqbal, we would like to hear from you. How do you view the situation of the youth, how they can play a stellar role in correcting some of the anomalies which are creeping back because of situation are not under our control thanks to pandemic? Over to you, Mr. Iqbal.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Excellency, for your gracious, well-wishing words. Excellency, High Commissioner, South Africa, thank you very much, diplomatists and members of the India-Africa Trade Council, other friends from the media. It gives me great pleasure to be there today on this August gathering. And more than anything, our role and how this year marks the 45th anniversary of what is famously known as the June 16th. And on this day, we remember and honor the generation of 1976, who took the bull by the horns, actually, and spearheading a student uprising in Soweto when the young people protested against the imposition of the Afrikaans language. 45 years is a long time, and the mere fact that we still remember and commemorate this day should be a sign to all that power is in the hands of young people to make a difference in the society they are living in. Young people should never put themselves down or they think they cannot achieve goals. Anything is possible with the young people. Now, the youth of 1976 did not imagine maybe that they would be celebrated 45 years down the line today for standing their ground and believing that they could make a difference to this world and the youth overall. Now, what could we imagine? We could have imagined what would have happened if they would have said no to the oppression. How life would have been like, today, had the apartheid government not had a taste of massive resistance that came up from the youth during the uprising. So the youth of 1966 made history on that day. Amidst the tragedy and the bloodshed, none less history was made. The youth of today needs to be reminded of what power they hold if they stand as a collective force. And no violence is necessary, but just through the search for solutions by a collective force that they have. And today, the advantage we have is that social media makes things easy these days, and we stay connected, whether we like it or not. It is a powerful tool to use just, for hashtags and memes, and these are the things that are moving the world, and how social media has proven it can be used to bring about regime change and topple governments, what we see globally today. It has been proven to be so powerful that influences our thought process and the decisions we make, and the youth is making optimum use of this. How glorious if it would be, if this tool could be used to change negative thoughts into positive ones, how to encourage the youth to take the care of the neighborhoods in which they live instead of waiting on the government to do it for them. And how great it is if successful youths could share their stories of small but sustainable businesses, which they have started on their own, which we have been seeing during the pandemic, and in what way they can benefit the community. So this is something that in recognition of the sacrifices and contributions of the youth in the struggle, we would like to see this India stands by this attestation, and the Indian youth also stands by this, as today's marks the 45th anniversary and how it has resulted in 200 deaths. We would like to emphasize on the fact that the youth today constitute 16% of the world's population, and these numbers are projected to increase to 17% by 2030. And today, many young people are connected to each other like never before. And they are a core demographic in the using and building of disruptive new technologies, what we are seeing today, many new technologies that have come up, and they are using and building these technologies. They're building global social and clean energy networks, and they need to be supported. However, youth have very little voice in development programs, peace negotiations, most international and domestic political decision-making, despite their economic significance and growing, the population here. So it is imperative youth have, given the opportunity to engage with international institutions and initiatives and contribute their ideas to resolve global issues. It's evident that if the youth step up to mobilize their nation's potential, our country's potential to move forward in the right direction, the youth here can create a significant impact on the nation's transformation on the international arena. In this regard, I would personally congratulate Kanchi Batra, who's as a youth, leading this movement in the Diplomatist, and is a part of the, diplomatic dialogues that happen regularly. And it is really important we have had this dialogue today. The reason the United Nations Security Council also number 392, if I remember, after this particular incident, and how the council strongly condemned the South African government for its measures. So it also expressed its shock, after the color shooting of the protesters. So the overall resolution reaffirmed how the policy of apartheid is a crime against the conscience and dignity of mankind, and which has seriously disturbed international peace and security. So the youth today should really, really follow and understand the narrative of this particular day to see how they can bring them together, and how it is high time the youth of the developing nation like India and South Africa, and especially South Africa, we are allowed to share our opinions and ideas on policy making, foreign diplomacy, as the former and the current generations of leaders have proven themselves incapable of walking the talk. We have seen all over the world, the global leaders, what is happening. The trauma of the COVID-19 that has spanned almost 20 months, few weeks, it is still going on. It has left its scars on all parts of the society, and the youth has been quite largely affected by this. And the youth from the COVID affected regions during this time, we have seen, even though they were left disillusioned by the lack of inclusion in international domestic development programs, they have still worked closely in bringing up and helping the COVID victims and trying to fight this pandemic. And if you look at the of the recent surge of COVID cases, if you see, there have been a lot of youth, who are involved in supporting initiatives in fighting the pandemic with their active role in various parts of the society. So the scope for youth in international agreement is vast, engagements is vast, diverse and untapped. And Africa should consider its past and the looming issues of youth-led initiatives to take more proactive role in countering youth issues by setting up platforms. We have the India, I think we have the BRICS platform, where we need to have the Indian and the South African youth that can enable the youth engagement in diplomatic affairs of our countries. It is necessary to facilitate our younger generations with appropriate skills required to excel in the field of international relations. Investing in young agents to change definitely offers a potential tremendous multiplier effect. And I was in Russia just last week, and I noticed how India and South Africa that can move and create key policy measures required in facilitating youth engagement programs and creating mechanisms for educational reforms. And the progress on this front has not been much promising, but I'm sure that we are going to be working from the India-Africa Trade Council to, particularly in the developing world, that the school curriculum does not adequately cover international politics and diplomacy. We have been proposing in the national education policy to see that international politics and diplomacy have to cover, and how we could create significance of foreign relations and the international community in determining India's prosperity and political stability along with South Africa. These issues are further compounded by the lack of facilities, but we are trying to accommodate all students that can qualify for tertiary education and giving them all the facilities that they can. Creating exchange programs for them to understand each other from India to South Africa is something that we are trying to do. And it has been social and mainstream. The students have the potential to inspire, given their considerable influence in the society. So therefore, youth radicalization and exploitation should not happen. It stop at the borders, and other social media and other modern means of communication should ensure that there is a high level of responsibility to maintain the integrity of information disseminated, so that the youth are informed about the necessity of their engagement while ensuring they are not influenced by exposure to extremist ideologies. And UN, I would like to say that it is playing a great role in this cause. UN youth strategy is the first attempt. They have a youth strategy, which is the first attempt at the framework to guide the international community with regard to youth involvement, and how it is reaffirming the UN's message that young people are essential asset worth investing in. And India is also working on a lot of youth development programs. And this kind of strategies incorporates the role of youth into the global sustainability via 3 pillars, that is peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. As Excellency rightly mentioned, the SDG goals are a responsibility of the youth today. And at its core, this particular strategy aims to provide blueprint for joint initiatives that we can create mechanisms for various collaborations and implementation of effective practices. So it also outlines the unique position of the United Nations to challenge and support India and South Africa and other states, and providing a platform through which their needs can be addressed and their voice can be amplified, their engagement can be advanced. And we would like to pledge, Excellency, our support and in cooperation and in supporting the initiatives that the South African governments are doing with Indian government for the youth, especially. And today I would once again like to congratulate you how the world is remembering this particular day. And once again, like to pledge this, and thank you very much, Excellency, for the valuable time. Excellency Soni and other panelists, I would wish you all the best on this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asif Iqbal. I think what you have set the ball rolling in an extremely important way, because as you said, the youth is the hope for the next generation. The SDGs have been set, but how do they go about is the main business. More importantly, people of my generation are not tech savvy, but the next generation can bridge the divide by doing things in a much more organized manner, in a more mechanized manner, in a more digital manner, which cuts out all the delays and other problems which come in the way. So it is important that the youth realize the importance of their contribution, and it will continue, because they will be taking over the next, already taking over the next generation. So they must be given opportunities. They must feel the responsibility, and the government must also keep into view that they are the ones who are the future. Excellency also mentioned that in his country, about 50% of the population is below 20 years, which is, I would say, a remarkable thing and augurs well for the future, because they are the ones who are now being trained to take over responsible positions later. Also, the new technologies have to be brought down to the grassroots level, which means it should not be restricted only to the people who know about it, but also to other persons, those who are not as well endowed, who are not as well educated. So it has to be made workable, so that they do not feel that they do not belong to it, and that's why they will carry forward the leadership role. So thank you very much, Dr. Asif Iqbal, for laying bare all these realities which have to be kept in view. So we have now two excellent speakers ahead of us, and they would, I'm sure, speak the language of the youth, because they are the ones who have been in the forefront. They have been in the academic. They have been also doing a lot of research and doing work which will be of interest to us, the older generation. And in that, I would like to single out particularly Ms. Hema Narang. She recently completed her PhD at the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Pursuing her undergraduate in political science from Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi University, and Masters in International Relations from JNU, she has also worked as a legislative assistant for Member of Parliament in Delhi. Her MPhil research delineated the broad contours of Chinese and Indian engagements in Africa, while the central thrust of her doctoral research was to examine the growing soft power capabilities of China and India in Africa. He has also been recipient of the Harvard Yenching Institute, Harvard University Center for African Studies, Fellowship for African Studies, 2019-20. So there you go. She has excellent, impeccable background. The best college in India, I would say Lady Shri Ram College. Best institution is Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, and she has been interacting with people, youth, various parts of the world. So her reaction will be of great importance to us, our generation, but also people in Africa, because there is somehow a perception that India and Africa are, India and China are competing in Africa, and China has a lead. I do not believe that it's the truth. There is scope for everybody. There is scope for both of us. China is not the only country. Africa is giving opportunities for youth in India. And if you were to remember that Indian emphasis in Africa is to provide technical training, not just aid, not just doing things from outside, but to involve Africans, to prepare the youth of Africa through their high-tech programs and to a whole lot of other things. So I think Dr. Hema Narang is very well placed to bring before us what is the ground situation, what is the situation right now, and how all countries can get together and do something for the future of Africa and our relations. Over to you, Ms. Hema Narang.
A very good afternoon to everyone present here. Thank you, His Excellency. Thank you, the diplomatist, Ms. Batra, and the members of the India-Africa Trade Council for putting this dialogue together and providing this platform to us. So as it has been reiterated before, June 16 is the National Youth Day in South Africa in honor of the youth who lost their lives during the Soweto uprising. So let me first begin with giving a brief background about the significance of the uprising and then go ahead with looking at the role of the youth in the contemporary development scenario. So in 1976, thousands of Black children in Soweto mobilized against the 1974 Afrikaans Medium Decree, mandating the use of Afrikaans, the language of the white minority ruling class, on an equal basis with English for instruction in apartheid's Black schools. The decree was the discriminatory education policy under the 1953 Bantu Education Act. The police met the peaceful march by students with brutal force. The protests and government crackdowns that followed, combined with the national economic recession, drew more international attention to South Africa and shattered all illusions that apartheid had brought any peace or prosperity to the nation. The uprising was thus a decisive moment in the history of South Africa and a crucial one in the struggle against apartheid. What it really did was to inscribe the role that young students can play an important role in the future of their country. And it expanded the realm of political activism to a whole new generation. Since then, students have held a special place in the collective imaginary of South African history. Student activism over the years has taken different forms at different points, from being a struggle against apartheid to recent ones that protest against university fees hike, to young activists that advocate on social issues such as poverty, inequality, and health. These protests have been crucial in shaping a wider discourse in political and social fabric of the country by giving a voice to the marginalized, by forming proper working groups on these issues, and becoming a broader basis for uniting the struggle. Just as the students then rose up against apartheid's oppressive racial order, youth in South Africa and other parts of the world recently rallied against the systemic racism following the killing of George Floyd. They joined protests calling for an end to systemic racism and excessive police brutality. So young people today in Africa and around the world are the key to solving entrenched problems, be it employment, education, health, or climate change. The inclusion of youth is essential to fighting these challenges at both the local and global level. They are the key actors in shaping the continent's sustainable political, social, economic, and environmental development. Their creative energy and enthusiasm play an important role in bringing about a transition which propels the country to move forward, as we saw it in the historical Soweto uprising. Brimming with new and creative ideas, the youth today express themselves confidently and clearly through the use of digital platforms. They are major influencers in different fields on social media, and they also raise awareness about various issues such as gender disparity or sexual harassment or religious discrimination. Being the most active and dynamic part of the society, they are willing to act as community leaders in the dialogue on development through various ways, be it their presence on social media or through involvement in civil society organizations or simply through their professional activities. Apart from being active socially and politically, they are driving change in the economic realm through their entrepreneurial endeavors. They are connected to the grassroots levels and are driving innovation-led solutions and growth. Africa today is home to some of the world's fastest growing economies. channelizing youth energy towards economic development will be key to long-term success. Africa has the youngest population in the world, with more than 400 million young people aged between 15 to 35 years. The size, energy, and innovation of these young people are assets that need to be harnessed with appropriate policies to further development. These young minds, with their creativity and intellect, can transform existing challenges into economic opportunities, channelize indigenous development programs, and their revolutionary zeal can result in advancement of society. These young people are driving a new class of entrepreneurs that African countries need to prosper, and their role in development has become crucial. There are numerous stories of young African entrepreneurs, edupreneurs, and agripreneurs who have taken the plunge and launched their own ventures. Supporting these young startups across Africa will boost African economies and create further investment opportunities. The African growth story will thus be led by these success stories and homegrown initiatives of these young entrepreneurs, change makers, and leaders, especially when there are widespread discussions about the presence and impact of other external actors on the continent. The development story of Africa will be driven by the young guns of Africa. In the last, I'd like to conclude with some suggestions about how the youth can play an important role in strengthening the India-Africa cooperation mechanisms. Mahatma Gandhi had once remarked that the commerce between India and Africa will be of ideas and services, not of manufactured goods against raw materials. The youth engagements in India-Africa relations can also be driven by an exchange of ideas. India-Africa relations have always been characterized by people-to-people relations, historical goodwill, and a long-standing historical diaspora. These engagements need to be strengthened through programs that are centered around an active role for the youth. With large young populations on both the sides, the youth can play a crucial role in this gamut of relations. Inter-university partnerships can be an important factor, and India-Africa youth exchange programs can be developed. The exchange programs need to be diverse, with multiple forums for dialogue that regularly facilitate interactions between young people on both the sides across fields and domains such as health, business, commerce, etc. Such education-based or intercultural youth exchanges and volunteer services will help young people on both the sides to broaden their personal horizons and acquire life and employability skills, gain better regional experience through such programs. This will empower the next generation, establish long-lasting ties between the two sides, and overall foster the people-to-people interactions. So I'll end here, and thank you everyone for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Narang. I think you have laid down a great path for us to follow. You've given specific examples what can be done in bringing the two countries together, particularly at youth level. You also mentioned about the possibility of exchange of ideas at youth level, people-to-people level. You've also mentioned that there should be inter-university partnership. You also mentioned about youth and cultural exchange program and volunteer programs. These are ideas which need to be implemented. I think from India's point of view, we already have been doing it over many decades. If you would have followed the ITEC program, is a program which is very well structured, has been in operation for decades, and my own ministry, former Ministry of External Affairs, has done a remarkable job in bringing people together, and thousands of scholarships, and not just academic scholarship. They are, of course, they're part of the cultural exchange program. We have had with some countries in the past cultural exchange program, which were quite active, and we were encouraging scholarships at both ends. You may be interested in knowing one particular aspect. I was ambassador in West Africa. I was ambassador to Senegal, Mali, Mauritania, Guinea-Bissau. Would you believe in the 1970s and 80s, there was a program which was initiated by the first president of Senegal of tracing linguistic links between Tamil on one side in south of India and Wolof, which is spoken in the western part of Africa. And they were able to establish definite links on the basis of the 5 research scholars had been sent from Senegal, and they came up with their findings, and it was remarkable. So what you are suggesting is that we should now move forward to a little bit more in many more countries. What we have done in the past is fine, but we can't possibly keep going back in the future. We have to think of how more we can do, because now the youth is more active, and they're willing to do a lot more. So a lot more to be done, and I'm sure that all the points and the suggestions which you have made have been taken duly note of, and they would be passed on to the authorities on both sides, who can think about them, dwell upon them, and see what can be done. Thank you very much for giving the perspective from the Indian youth point of view. Now I turn to the South African youth point of view. And I have great pleasure in inviting Mr. Rolf. He's a research fellow at the Center for Legal Profession at Harvard Law School. Prior to joining CLP, he worked at the Legal Resources Center, a public interest law clinic at Johannesburg, South Africa. In legal practice, he focused on strategic litigation around socio-economic rights, constitutional and international human rights, and for vulnerable and marginalized communities in South Africa and the Southern African region. Previously, he served as a research and teachers technical associate at the School of Law at the University of in Johannesburg, where he supported the school's academic program and pursued his own research. So we have great pleasure in inviting you, sir, for giving us your perspective. How do you think, what more can be done to bring our two countries together, particularly the youth of the country, keeping in view your domain experience? And we look forward to hearing you. Thank you, Mr. Rao.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the diplomatist and South African High Commission in India for organizing this very important event. I must say it's a real pleasure to speak at an event like this that commemorates the activities of the youth from my hometown. In a very real sense, I am a direct beneficiary of their actions and their personal sacrifice, which led South Africa to the point where it could be a free, democratic state. As we honor those who contributed valiantly to the struggle against apartheid, we do so at a time when we face immense challenges of our own. This past year has undoubtedly been incredibly difficult for people around the world. Along with the devastating health impacts of COVID-19, we have endured significant upheaval, financial struggles, and great uncertainty about the future. Yet, reflecting on the struggles endured by earlier generations reminds us that through difficulties come opportunities to remake our world in more just and egalitarian form. Today, as we face these challenges, the majority of leaders in many countries are in their 60s and 70s. Indeed, as a trend, leaders are getting older, and I suspect they're getting more conservative as well. As leaders become older, what role does the youth play in shaping our future? It was Malcolm X who observed that young people are the ones who most quickly identify with the struggle and the necessity to eliminate evil conditions. In my talk, I want to highlight 3 points related to youth leadership. First, I argue that youth can exercise power from below. Second, I illustrate that there is a rich history of youth leadership from outside of elected positions. To do this, I highlight the contributions of 3 generations and the individuals who led them, which contributed to South Africa's emancipation. Finally, I consider the challenges facing the youth of our times. The first generation I want to highlight is one which we risk forgetting, and we do so at our own peril. These are the original resistors to colonialism in the 19th and 20th centuries. This generation was led by young people like Pixley Isa Gaseme, Mahatma Gandhi, who began the tradition of non-violent resistance in South Africa. As a 31-year-old lawyer, Seme founded the African National Congress and called for the regeneration of Africa, rejecting the racism of colonization and its inherent exploitation of African peoples. Similarly, as a 23-year-old barrister, Mahatma Gandhi settled in South Africa and decided to devote himself to serving the Indian community in South Africa, establishing Indian political organizations which challenged white rule and white domination. Together, they symbolize the ability of youth to speak truth to power, often at personal expense, but they also illustrate that there is a long history of non-violent struggle in South Africa, which dates back to the early 1900s. The second generation, which I want to highlight, is one you'll be more familiar with. This generation was led by the young Nelson Mandela and Robert Sobukwe, who were key figures in transforming the resistance against colonialism and apartheid. This generation saw the rise of apartheid in the mid-20th century and the failure of traditional methods of resistance to secure equal rights for Black people. This generation built on the tradition of non-violent resistance, which was begun by the early fighters against colonialism. And they challenged not only the state, but also their seniors within their political organizations, who were less radical and more complacent. Of course, we know that this challenge was met with brutal resistance from the authorities. Indeed, many leaders within this generation were jailed, exiled, or killed. Which brings us to the generation which we are commemorating today. That is the youth of 1976, which I argue was building on this long tradition of resistance and found themselves facing new and unprecedented challenges. With the African National Congress and other political organizations banned and driven underground, a new generation of leaders emerged. This generation was even younger and more radical than their parents. Many of these heroes' names are not recorded, but together they made a contribution which will forever be etched in South African history. But why did students take this position? Why did they stand up to the brutal system of oppression which had imprisoned and killed many of their forebears? I think it is impossible to speak of Youth Day and youth resistance without mentioning the contribution of another leader who was a key figure in shaping the ideas of this generation. And that, of course, is Steve Biko, whose own life was cut short at the tender age of 30. In no small part, Biko, through his teachings and through the Black consciousness movement, embarked on a struggle to empower the youth, not only to resist apartheid, but to value their own humanity. He sought to achieve a common humanity by moving the debate away from racial terms. As Biko argued, being Black is not a matter of pigmentation. Being Black is a reflection of a mental attitude. By merely describing yourself as Black, you have started on a road towards emancipation. You have committed yourself to fight against all forces that seek to use your Blackness as a stamp that marks you as a subservient being. Through these and other words, Biko restored the pride of the oppressed and ensured that the youth were energized to struggle for self-determination. Indeed, the youth of 1976 were conscientized in this way. They made it clear that they would not allow apartheid to decide their fate. As another young leader, a high school student at the time who led the uprising in 1976, Tsietsi Mashinini, said, "Students today want to be recognized as human beings." These are incredibly powerful words, which proved a tremendous challenge to apartheid's system of degradation and dehumanization. Indeed, they inspired future generations to take up their voice, and the acts of these students remind us that every contribution counts, and no one, from the elementary school student to a high school student to people about to retire, everybody's contribution counts. Today, the youth face many challenges. We have heard from His Excellency Mr. Joe Sibusiso on the incredible array of challenges. These include unemployment, education, and social isolation. Yet I want to argue that the tradition of resistance remains strong. The question then becomes how we understand and respond to the voices that the youth are bringing to bear on contemporary issues. To illustrate my point, we have seen from 2015 the emergence of movements such as Fees Must Fall, which challenge education policy and seek to open access to marginalized communities in higher education. This kind of activity is following on a long line of activity by students who want to make their voice heard, despite the fact that they don't have direct access to the levers of power. Another instance which I want to highlight and which shows the global reach of the ideas of young people is the Rhodes Must Fall movement, which again begins in 2015 and challenges the iconography of colonial figures such as Cecil John Rhodes. This movement rejects the afterlife of colonialism and white supremacy. Indeed, I would argue that this movement was central to shaping some of the images that we saw in the wake of George Floyd's death, when we saw people being conscientized to the persistence of iconography from the colonial and slave trade eras. We saw images in the UK of statues being taken down, commemorations being challenged, merely because young people said they did not want to live in a world that valorized the contributions of slave traders and white supremacists. They wanted something different. Yet, reflecting on the youth of 1976 raises the question, how are we empowering young voices today? How can we become conscious to the plight of the marginalized? The answers we put forward to these questions have not only national, but regional and global implications. Africa's population is set to double by 2050. Half of that population will be less than 25 years old. To ensure that Africa can take its pride of place among nations and to realize the dream of not only Biko, but the others who fought valiantly to ensure that South Africa and other African countries could be free from colonial and apartheid rule is realized. We need to harness the power and bold transformative vision of young leaders like Seme, Gandhi, and Mandela, who challenge the status quo and who challenge even their own superiors within their organizations. Indeed, as Pixley Seme said in his speech, The Regeneration of Africa, we cannot remain where we are. We cannot fall back. We must advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rolf. I think you've given a totally different perspective a historical perspective, which I like because I am a student of history. You have gone back to the 3 generations. What are the challenges they faced at that particular time, how they faced it, and how it was passed on to the 2nd generation. And now, having learned from the 2 generations, the 3rd generation, which has to carry forward the good work which they did. So, to my mind, I think you have excellently brought out all those issues. By bringing in Biko's role, I think you have done a remarkable service, because a lot of people have started forgetting what he did. He died much before his time. 30 years is too young in age from the promise which he showed before. If he had been alive, he would have provided the biggest possible leadership to the country and to the younger generation. So we miss him, but at the same time, we remember him, because what he did and how he shaped the thinking process is what is important. You've also made a very important point that by the year 2050, Africa's population will double. But more importantly, half of them would be less than 25 years of age. I think that is the demographic dividend which you have. The rest of the world, Western world in particular, is aging and aging very fast. And some countries like China is rethinking whether it was the correct policy to change. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we should breed without control. We must not. But at the same time, think of the demographic dividend which we have. So we need to think about the issues which you have flagged. We need to see how we can carry forward the same messages of the past generation, and we should think of the next generation. And this is where your points come in very, very important and very healthy. Kanchi must have already told you, in fact, she did tell you that one of our speakers, Mr. Jain, could not unfortunately join us for some reason. And so we are now come down to the finish of the scheduled speakers we have. But it's not the end of the session, because we have very interesting session for question and answer lined up. This, I think, should be the most stimulating part of our session today. I'm sure that there will be many, many people who will be waiting to put their questions. But for a start, I have already received, Kanchi had received a few questions from various quarters. And what we will do is we'll take the questions one by one. I'll mention the names of the persons who have posed those questions, their names, and what are the things which they would like to pose to the panelists, so that they can come up with their ideas, and they would be happy, I'm sure, to listen to how they would like to be told about various things. So the first question I have is from the ambassador of Suriname to India, Asna Kanhai. Comes from Caribbean. I had the good fortune of serving in the Caribbean as High Commissioner of India in Jamaica. So I love that area, love the people, love the culture. And also I saw how the Indian community was treated there by the colonial powers, how they took those people as indentured laborers to various parts of the world. Fiji, again, I was posted in Fiji. Africa, of course, we know, but to the Caribbean. So the question from the ambassador of Suriname to India is, the ideals behind the Youth Day are inspiring for youth, for example, in my own country, that is Suriname. Having been colonized by the Dutch, the people of my country may be able to see common challenges to finally overcome racial differences. This is the question which she has posed, and I cannot do anything better than ask His Excellency the High Commissioner for South Africa, because you will speak from the perspective of a diplomat, and I'm not suggesting that diplomat should answer the diplomat. But let me start with you, and then I will go and pose the questions to some of the other panelists on this. So, Excellency, the floor is yours.
I'm not sure I got the question.
Okay, I'll read it again. The ideals behind Youth Day are inspiring for youth. For example, in my country, she's talking about South Africa's Youth Day being celebrated. Having been colonized by the Dutch, the people of my country may be able to see common knowledge to finally overcome racial differences, which means, how do you think that countries like Suriname learn from your experience, which is the colonial experience? You faced them well, they faced also, but how they can learn from your experience? You're a bigger country, your challenges are much more.
No, thank you very much. The struggle in South Africa has many lessons, just like we learned so much from the rest of the world. I think the one critical point that one wants to make even now is that there was always this linkage between the younger generation, the youth leading the struggle, coming with vibrant ideas and so forth. But they made those ideas not only the ideas of the youth, they made it the ideas of the whole society, so that you'll find the linkages, the Tsietsi Mashininis, the Seth Mazibugos, the Telmon Sinsis, and Nephi Robes, who link up with the Dr. Ntato Montanas, the Albertina Sisulus, the Winnie Mandelas, the Zef Mutupings, and so that it became a whole societal issue, even if it emanated from the youth, which is as it should be. The young people have always been the people who generate ideas. I first had to hear, even during the struggle itself, I learned about Suriname. I learned about Suriname because of Miriam Makeba singing about Suriname, and where is this Suriname? What is going on there? Oh no, they had the same experience as us, being oppressed and colonized by the Dutch. Oh, then there was the commonality. They were colonized by the Dutch, we were colonized by the Dutch, and later the English, and then the Africans. So you find the commonality of experience, and you use that experience to fight in all the aspects of the struggle, locally and then international mobilization. I think the people of Suriname will find support all the time because as Tata Nelson Mandela said, the freedom of South Africa has to be a foundation for the freedom of every oppressed people anywhere. And that is the solidarity that even in terms of our foreign policy, it is the foundation that will always give succor and support to ensure that whatever oppression is there in the world, it's got to be addressed. And the best method that we know is the Mandela way, that the people of a given country, no matter how hostilities might be, but at the end, you sit around the table and resolve your question. If you are belonging to this country, you can't wish the other section of the people not to belong to the country. You have got to make that country habitable and a happy place for all of you. So that's what we'll say to the people of Suriname, that South Africa is there to support and ensure that the people of Suriname find each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I think you've made a very important point, because South Africa has taught a lot of things to a lot of countries. They went through one of the most repressive regimes for decades, for generations, for a century. And yet, at the time of freedom, that rancor was not allowed to happen. And I think Nelson Mandela, to me, is the greatest man, despite the fact that for how many decades he was condemned, he was leading the life of a prisoner, and yet he forgave them. And because he was moving forward. So that is the lesson which I think quite a number of countries should draw from them. Because if that had not been the case, there would have been so much reprisal, there would be so much bloodshed, instead of concentrating on the development of the economic prospect. First of all, bringing society together, integrating, that was the first challenge. And then, of course, the development prospect. So I think that is the lesson which I would like to draw from South African experience. You're forgiving people. You do not want to hark back to your past, and you're willing to share your experience, advice with fellow countries who suffered, like Suriname did. Thank you very much for your comments, and maybe my friend Ralph would also like to add, because you are a man from the masses, as it were, and you have examined, studied people and their attitudes. What would you like to advise the Suriname?
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. So I think the colonial ties create not only a shared history, but they also create opportunities for new kinds of networks across time and space. I mean, you well know that Suriname and South Africa have a history of Dutch colonial rule in common, but this is not only the extent of it. It extends to Southeast Asia and countries like Indonesia. So as we face the challenges of the 21st century and how to create societies that are cohesive, often with multi-ethnic and multiracial populations, we can draw on lessons across these countries. But we can also seek to create new bonds politically and economically to strengthen the relation between these countries, such that social ills such as xenophobia and nationalism, which are plaguing other countries in the world today, and indeed South Africa, can be cured or indeed challenged by an awareness that we're all bound together by the same thread, not only historically, but in the present as well.
Thank you very much. Very good answers to both of them. I have not come to you, Dr. Asif Iqbal, for this question, because this has been answered so very well from first-hand experience, so there's no point in asking you to repeat that. But I would like to come to you on a subject which is a lot closer to your heart, which is business. This is a question from Mr. Daniel Essiet. He's a British business journalist for the Nation newspaper. The question which he has posed is, how is South Africa and India partnership boosting jobs, growth, and agribusiness expansion in Africa? I think there is no better person than you to address this question and advise and react.
Thank you so much.
You want me to repeat the question? I repeat that once again.
No problem. I understood overall the gist of it. Yes. So I understand completely, and especially in the field of South Africa partnerships, looking at the South-South cooperation, since we both come from the side of the South side, is number one. Number two is with the BRICS partnerships that we have had. We are working very closely on partnerships for food security and capacity building. And this is something very important for us, because India's population in South Africa, there's a huge diaspora, Indian diaspora in South Africa, which is working very actively. And I think the areas that we are working towards are mainly into food security. And there are some lot of ongoing trends and challenges in our South-South cooperation. And Africa is a selected country, and India is working with that. How the poverty reduction and how we are working on practitioner sharing diverse perspectives on the role of India's development compact, aid, trade, private sector, and FDIs. We also have the concessional lines of credit and LOCs to various agriculture and agro-processing sector between India and Africa. And this relationship between the two countries underscores that our sharing of knowledge and capabilities is very important to the technical and the financial partnership as well, because we have various mechanisms that have been created, and India and South African partnerships are here to stay.
Okay, now as a follow-up to the same question, there is quite a big talk about food security. It's important that we address the issue of food security in various parts of the world. I'm not talking about only Africa, but Africa could be the breadbasket, because the potential today to exploit the agriculture sector is so enormous. The soil is so fertile. Having been there at least 50, 60 times, I am fascinated by the opportunities that exist there. Soil is very fertile. It's not been cropped in terms of cycling. Also, availability of water is there. And yet we are not able to come up with a plan where India and South Africa, all of Africa can join hands together, because our requirement itself is so huge for pulses, etc. And we are now trying various experiments of doing farming, Indian farmers going there and doing something. You have specific ideas which they think they could follow in this particular fold to ensure food security for the humanity, not just for India and Africa?
Well, the food security aspect of Africa is really huge and the demand is really big. Our last month, we had visited Zimbabwe, and we noticed that the growing of corn was very, very important, and they could not reach the figure of 2 million tons. And now we have got Indian companies going and setting up Center of Corn Excellence to grow corn, which is, something which is a very staple diet of that country. So as you say, the human potential in agriculture and skill development is very high. And if encashed properly and if mechanisms are created in a way that can enable these partnerships, it is going to be a very good thing. Only the structural aspect of creating these mechanisms is what is needed between the two countries. And our government is working very closely, and FAO is also been taken in charge to work on these aspects. So I think Indian human potential has to be optimally used by the African nation, and we will be able to achieve this by 2030.
Thank you. If nobody else has anything to add, I'll move on to the next question. And the next question, I think Ms. Narang will be in a position to address properly. The question is from Mr. Ronald Kato, student from Uganda. And the question is, what role should youth play towards developing a sense of togetherness? Remaji, if you would like to address this issue. And I'll also come to Ralph.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. I think sense of togetherness. So there are a lot of platforms today, to create that sense of togetherness. It could be through social media. The youth today is heavily present on social media, all kind of digital platforms. And I think not only youth from, say, the urban areas, even the youth from rural areas and other areas, they're all present on social media. That could be a good medium to create a sense of togetherness. And it could also be from the side of, say, the regime, the government. They can also create some sort of avenues to create harmony amongst the youth. Yeah, I think if that answers my
You also had covered earlier in your opening remarks this issue of specific interaction between the two. Anybody else who want to add, or shall I move on to the next question? Okay, the next question.
Well, we can say.
Please.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We can say, in terms of social cohesion, that the youth has got quite a big role to play. The main advantage that the youth has is that they don't have the vivid memory of racism, of apartheid. They don't carry the baggage of that apartheid era. They grow up where they are beginning to go to the same schools, same universities, same technicons, and face the same opportunities. No one is going to have a particular advantage for a job simply because they are white, they are black, or they are male. So that you are approaching a legally and constitutionally equal society and turn that constitutional right into reality. They've got that opportunity, which the youth of the past didn't have because they had barriers, the walls of apartheid, which was they could not ignore. But the youth of today are moving in a much more equal society, and therefore have got a bigger role, and their linkages is not hindered by the baggage of racism of the past.
I think that is a very important point you made, Excellency. Well, the next question is from Mr. Chris Paul. He's advisor to Independent Advisory Services. The question says, what action can and will the South African government take to reduce the high numbers of unemployed youth in South Africa? Maybe you could start, Mr. Ralph, and after that, maybe High Commissioner may like to add something to that.
Thank you. I am aware that the South African government is engaged in a number of programs which seek to develop youth skills, not only literacy and numeracy, but technical skills as well. I mean, the challenge that we have is just the sheer number of unemployed people. As you may know, the unemployment rate is in some estimates as high as 27%. That presents the serious challenge of having everybody participate fully. And I think a major response that the state can do is to create further opportunities for businesses to expand and for new kinds of enterprise to take root in South Africa, which will allow young people to participate in the formal economy and move their life away from the informal economy and subsistence labor or unemployment altogether. So I think the challenge should be shared between not only the state, but also the private sector and society to make people available and to ensure that the people who are available are used and harnessed in a way that they can fulfill their potential for the country.
Thank you. I think the problem has been further compounded by the present situation caused by pandemic. Globally, there has been such a devastating effect on jobs, businesses, and people are getting laid everywhere, perhaps not so much in the West, particularly Europe and US, but I know for sure closer home in India, and I'm sure the same is situation in Africa. So these are challenging times, very difficult times. Unemployment as it is was there before. Now it has assumed alarming proportion. So when situations like this happen, one has to come up with answers for which the economic planners, I'm sure, would be already thinking about it, what kind of stimulus that can be given. Countries in the US and Europe can afford to give a lot of stimulus to boost the country's economy. But countries elsewhere, particularly in Africa, they do not have that much of bulging foreign exchange reserves or money to even give the basic necessity for giving a boost. So that is the point I feel we have to keep in view while taking up the matter. Excellency, would you like to add something, or shall I move on to the next one?
Yes, I think we can go on, but perhaps share a thought, perhaps a question on how do we imagine post-COVID society? We've got used to this thing of working from home. Do we imagine that post-COVID, we are going to have these millions again commuting to work, or some aspects of this thing of working from home is going to continue? And what opportunities does that create? If we starting working from home, doesn't that start a new entrepreneurial spirit where people can be creative where they are? They already have the education. There is no immediate chance of going to to a job or 8 to 5 job, you are already working from home. Doesn't that also, this calamity, create perhaps new opportunities of reimagining the post-COVID world?
Thank you, sir. Maybe Dr. Iqbal, just a quick point from you, because I think this has been very well covered by the two experts. But I thought, since you are a businessman and you are the one who provides employment to a lot of people and business opportunities, how do you feel that discussion can be?
Well, Excellency, I think we have to look at entrepreneurship as the key to employment, and being employed is something that has to be it is gone case right now. So we have to focus on entrepreneurship and how we can create entrepreneurship in people and how to make them self-reliant and self-sustainable is the key. And I think we are working towards that. And as you said, the situation in India is a little more different with our population and our situations here. However, we are trying our best to see the wait for the whole thing to recover in the next 1 or 2 months. And government is also planning a few schemes and focusing on some certain kind of strategies and disbursement for the youth. So let us hope for the best, and we are looking forward to see how we can support and strengthen them.
Thank you. I think I have just 1 or 2 more questions, and I think we are nearing our time, but I don't know where Kanchi has disappeared. But in the meanwhile, I'll put a question, and that is, what is the role of youth in our current economic situation, and how do we link it to the Soweto uprising? Not just the economic situation, but also how it can be linked to the Soweto uprising. This is by Meenal Babbar, Diplomatic Sale, KTC India Private. Mr. Ralph is the one I'm looking first of all, and then I'll go to others.
Thank you. So I think the youth today have, especially in South Africa, many similarities with the youth of 1976. They find themselves in a predicament where they are marginalized from the economy. You recall that in 1976, the youth were being trained to perform menial tasks in the economy. Their role was very marginal. In South Africa today, unfortunately, not everyone has equal access to educational opportunities that allow them to participate in the high knowledge, high skill economy that we have today. So the lessons that I draw from 76 is about drawing in people from the margins. How can we ensure that not only members of the elite classes of society can participate fully in the economy, but also people who haven't had those opportunities? And I think there we can look at new kinds of social programs and educational programs within companies as well as within the state. There are companies that are taking the lead technologically to ensure that people can be trained online, especially during this period that has accelerated, to ensure that people can be upgraded in terms of their skills in participating in a new kind of economy, which, as Mr. Sbusiso indicated, is increasingly based on remote work and access to telecommunications. So we need to be creative, and we need to look for opportunities not only to hire people with skills, but also to impart skills on people who may otherwise not have access to them. So we need to be creative. I think the challenge that we stand before today is how to be flexible and adaptable to ensure that we can not only create a brighter future, but a different kind of future. So not necessarily formal credentials and educational training, but also on-the-job training and digital skill upgrades.
Thank you. Anybody else want to, Excellency, would you like to add? I think you've already mentioned, but I would like to throw the floor for you in case you have any additional point to make.
No, I think
Okay.
panelist Ralph has covered it.
In that case, Hemaji, if you would like to add to this point, because after that I have nothing much except one small observation. So
I can speak on behalf of the Indian context, where I saw actually a very active role from the youth. I mean, especially looking at what happened in the second wave of COVID in India. We saw the youth participating, as COVID warriors. When we saw a lack of preparedness from the government side, the youth was all prepared to deliver, say, oxygen cylinders, be it in the civil society or be it on the economic side, on the donations. So the youth was playing a very active role there. So in terms of pandemic, not just even on the social side, but even on the economic side, coming up with ideas and so on, like entrepreneurs like Vedantu and Byju's app, they are coming up with all different kinds of ideas of how to keep the kids entertained and busy. So I think the youth is playing a pretty active role in terms of COVID.
I don't know how. Kanchi, I have run out of questions. If there are any other questions, any participant wants to put, I'll be happy to give the floor. But before that, I've just a small statement which has been sent to me by Mr. Anup Bose, who is advocate at the Supreme Court of India. He made an observation. It is not really a question, so I'll just read out for the benefit of those who are attending. It says, South Africa is very close to my heart. I am greatly influenced by Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. I am an indefatigable opponent of apartheid and any form of racial discrimination. Last but not the least, I am a friend of African people. So that was the statement which he has made, which I've read out. So, Kanchi, from my side, I have done the work. All the people have made their statements and questions have been asked. They were very well answered. I was very impressed. Each and every one of the participants was so thorough in their responses and very active in their responses. So I think it's been a very great occasion for me to chair this particular session. And I believe, is there any question or shall I move and say my concluding words?
I can see a hand being raised by one of our participants. So,
okay. But do we have time? We have time because already we are over time.
We can take. Shall I allow her to talk?
No, yes, of course. There are one or two questions can be taken, I think. Please. Vasundhara, please. We are waiting. You there?
I doubt. I think in that case, I will propose the official vote of thanks.
Okay, good. Carry on. First, let me thank all my participants. They have been wonderful, wonderful people. I have not come across such a knowledgeable, so patient panelists. I must say that they have been super. I couldn't have asked for anything better. Made my task much, much easier. Thank you very much individually.
Kanchi, thanks for making me to ask this question because actually I was on mute, and this was one of the wonderful discussion which I had been participated, and of course I have been associated with Dr. Asif Iqbal, and he has a very wide knowledge and abundant knowledge throughout worldwide, and he has been associated with multiple entities as well as he's doing a wonderful work for South Africa and Western Africa and Eastern Africa. So I think we would look forward like what all the discussions which has happened related to various sectors and verticals like agriculture and trading as well as in many sectors. I think the youth has to come forward and they have to learn a lot of diplomatist as well as social politics, which has to be a mandatory education, has to be implemented in the system so that they would be understanding in the future and they would be going to make really a difference in the coming years in 2030. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for making me to give my ideas and views. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Vasundhara. Thank you very much. Sorry we couldn't hear you before, but I think you made your point very well and very valid points too.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to thank the High Commissioner, Ambassador Joel Nabedele. It was a great honor for us to have you speak at this dialogue. Ambassador Soni, I would like to thank you for your very excellent hold on the discussion. We are grateful for the time and effort you took to share your thoughts and experiences with us. Dr. Iqbal, thanks for your enlightening remarks. We are always very happy to have you with us. Ms. Hema and Mr. Rolf, thank you for your very active participation. The compassion you both have shown is commendable. To all the participants, we hope that you would want to be involved in our future events as well. We will see you on the 29th of June as we commemorate the 30th independence anniversary of Slovenia, as they also take on the rotating 6-month presidency of the European Union from July 1st. Now, as I close this discussion, I'm happy to play a mesmerizing video on South Africa, the Rainbow Nation, which is actually a world in one country. Have a look. Thank you all and have a good day.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your patience and for the time which you spent. It's been a wonderful occasion to meet all of you. Maybe one of these days, once the situation improves, we'd like to meet you one-to-one also. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you very much.